It says, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years. This is very important. And please listen to this verse because it is very important to understand something that we see in the New Testament and that Christians take not to study scriptures. Basically, they take it as an excuse or justification not to read the book of Revelation or not to think about times regarding the end because of one verse that Yahushua spoke regarding one instant in particular, saying like he said it in a particular historical context with which we should take in account when we interpret those verses. So, and I am talking about when Mashiach said that no one knows the day or the hour, but only the Father, not even the angels, nor his Son. No one knows the day or the hour. I have said there are many ways in which one can interpret those words. There are many reasons why Yahushua said that in that way. And we need to understand, and we should at least, even if we want to take those words in the most literal sense and pretty much omit other verses of scriptures which would go against or would be a kind of a contradiction with that literal interpretation of no one knows the day or the hour. Because, for instance, scripture says that Yahweh does not do anything before he reveals it to his servants, the prophets. So, Yahushua saying no one knows in present, 2,000 years ago, the day or the hour, except the Father, doesn't mean that no one can get to know in the future. He didn't say no one will know. He said no one knows in the present, 2,000 years ago. Just like in Acts 1, he says to the disciples that it's not for them to know the times. For them. Even Paul kind of hinted that it was not for them to know the times. Because there will be 2,000 years from their time to ours, which is the end times. So, I hope that is being clear. It's very important to understand many things that I'm going to say in this chapter, and most of it in this verse. They say no one knows the day or the hour. Even if we were to take those words literal and in all time, without taking other parts in account, like what I said, when Yahweh decides to do something, when he decides to actually manifest, he will manifest it to his prophets, which in this case will be the two witnesses at least, because he doesn't do anything without saying it to his prophets. So even though no one knows or knew when Yahushua said it, one can get to know when he, Yahweh, decides to do it, because according to his own law, when he's about to do something, he reveals it to his prophets. So I hope that's clear. One cannot use one verse of scripture, take it out of context, and then use it as an excuse to not study the rest of scriptures or think that it doesn't matter. One of the matters that matters the most in scripture, which is the end, other than Yahushua's sacrifice, the most important time in history and the most important thing that one can do is study the end times, how everything is going to end, so that one can be on the right end of things. So we are reading here that Daniel realized the time in which he was through the books, not through a vision, not through a miracle, not through a whatever, what people think. An angel came down and told him this is what is about to happen, as it would happen to him in other times. But in this case, in something so important, so particular, which is time, we read that it says, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of Yahweh came to Yirmiyahu the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. So Daniel, the book of Daniel, is pretty much the book of Revelations of the Old Testament. I hope that is understood already. So we have like two pillars of the end times, even though all the prophets speak of the end times and the whole scriptures, the entire scriptures, but the Old Testament is all about the end times. Even though that's the case, Daniel is clearly a contrast to the book of Revelation. So with that understood, seeing those parallels between the old and the new covenant, we see that Daniel understood by reading the books, especially that of Yirmiyahu, in which Yahweh prophesied to Jeremiah that Israel will be taken out of their land and taken to Babylon for 70 years. Exactly 70 years. So Daniel, by reading scriptures in a time which represents the end times, because he was reading that in the time, well, like he's saying here, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years. So, like I was saying, it represents like the two witnesses when they realize they are in the end, when they realize their ministry started. So they would have 1,260 days. So through scriptures, Revelation 11, it is written how much time the two witnesses have, and therefore how much time the world has, because after one realizes that, one can figure out the rest. Just like the two witnesses would do in the end times by reading scriptures in the book of Revelation, for instance, Daniel, by reading the book of Yirmiyahu, saw and realized and believed that Babylon was to fall, because Yahweh said 70 years. So he realized, well, we are in the 70-year moment, so the Persians and the Medes must enter and destroy Babylon. So right when it was going to happen, Yahweh revealed it to Daniel by reading it in Jeremiah. So this is very important. The end is already written. One must find it. That's all. And one could say, but in the book of Jeremiah, it's clear. It was very easy. Jeremiah said 70 years, etc., etc. Yeah, but many other things in scriptures are written that easily, yet nobody understands them until everything happens. So that's key. Like, for instance, all the times in the book of Daniel, all the times in the book of Revelation, 1,260 days, 42 months, times, and half a time, etc. So one can know the end and the time of it by reading the revelation that Yahweh gave to the prophets. And sometimes it may be as easy as in 70 years from this moment specifically. So you can go in time and be like, okay, this is the moment, 70 years afterwards will be this time. Some other times can be a little bit deeper or through a mystery for a different reason, which eventually become clear after history happens. His story happens. So in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the year, which is 70. And we are about to see through this chapter how those 70 years of Jeremiah prophesied that Israel would go for that time to Babylon. Those 70 years are a representation of the time that the people of the Almighty Israel would go to the nations, which would be as Babylon, because of the whore of Babylon, the doctrine of the whore of Babylon. So just like Israel went for 70 years to Babylon, here Yahweh is about to prophesy through Daniel that Israel would go to the nations, which would be as Babylon spiritually, for 70 weeks. So the 70 and the 70 like years and weeks of years, which would be at the end 490 years. 7 times 70, 490. So 490 years would be what we are about to see, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I just want you to see this. The number 70 represents the nations. So that's why 70 years, that's why 70 weeks of Israel among the nations, controlled by the spirit of Babylon, confusion. In the sense of why Israel had to go for 70 years to Babylon is because they didn't fulfill the Torah not 1 year. They broke the Torah by not allowing the, many other things. But one key element was that they didn't allow the land to rest during the Shemitah year. None of the Shemitah years they respected. So they owed the land 70 years of rest. So Yahweh took them out so that the land would rest. And when it comes to the number 70, like I said, represents the 70 nations in which Yahweh separated humanity after Noah, who came from Ham, Shem, and Yafet. Those three were the children of Noah, from whom came all the nations. And you can read it in Genesis how 70 children came from those three. Those 70 represent the 70 nations in which humanity was divided during the time of the Tower of Babel, when the languages were confused into 70, so that everyone who had a specific language became a nation and went and got their own land. So that's why the number 70 is important. Whereof the word of Yahweh came to Yirmiyahu the prophet. He even specifies what prophet gave the prophecy and the time. So therefore now we can read this that we are reading, thanks to the Almighty, and understand the time that Yahweh decided for the end of the sins of his people, and well, for many other things, for the end of this reality. And therefore we would say, as we read it in the book of Daniel, the prophet Daniel, the prophet Daniel, as we see here, as the word of Yahweh came to Yirmiyahu the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And I set my face unto Yahweh Elohim. By now we're already back in Hebrew in the book, so it says Adonai Ha Elohim. And I set my face unto Adonai Ha Elohim, to seek by prayer and supplications, with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. You see here a confirmation of what I said earlier regarding how this represents the beginning of the ministry of the two witnesses. How Daniel in the book of Revelation, which was written by Yahuchanan, represent two pillars of the end, like the two witnesses. So the first year of the sovereign who came silent and poor, so the first year of the ministry of the two witnesses would be one of the interpretations. Now we see here that he put on sackcloth and ashes, like we see in the book of Revelation chapter 11, that the two witnesses, when they begin their ministry, they get sackcloth. And let me go for a moment to just to show that. Revelation 11 says, verse 2, but leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the set apart city underfoot for 42 months. Verse 3, and I will give power to my two witnesses, like Moshe and Aaron, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Sackcloth. So we see here that Daniel, the first year of the reign of the sovereign of the Medes, it says, and I set my face unto Adonai Elohim, to seek by prayer and supplication with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. So is as one of the two witnesses, realizing the end is coming and therefore getting ready to preach the testimony that we see for 1260 days.